It happened in front of 12 million live viewers. Jonathan Roumie, the man who brought Jesus Christ to life on screen, was ordered to strip away his cross like it was contraband. His face calm, but his eyes burning with the fire of conviction. Whoopi Goldberg didn't hesitate. The cameras didn't cut. The world watched as Hollywood's most authentic voice of faith was publicly humiliated, accused of making viewers uncomfortable with his beliefs, and commanded to hide the very symbol of salvation in the middle of what was supposed to be a celebration of his groundbreaking work on The Chosen. You could feel the tension slice through the studio like a blade. The moment she pointed directly at his neck and delivered those crushing words, the audience gasped, not out of shock at Jonathan's quiet presence, but at the brazen assault on something sacred happening in real time. No discussion, no respect, no consideration, just secular power flexing its muscle against the cross of Christ in front of a global audience. And what no one in that studio knew, what Whoopi and her producers couldn't have predicted in their wildest nightmares, was that Jonathan had been preparing for this exact moment his entire life. This wasn't just an ambush on faith. This was about to become the most devastating exposure of religious bigotry ever captured on live television. Because hidden in Jonathan's jacket pocket was something that would turn their attack into their own destruction. A recording device that had been running since the moment he walked into that building, capturing every whispered insult, every behind-the-scenes moment of mockery, every second of their coordinated assault on Christianity. But that's not even the most shocking part. What happened next, what Jonathan said in response to that demand, didn't just silence Whoopi Goldberg. It triggered a chain reaction that would bring down careers, expose a massive conspiracy against faith in Hollywood, and spark the largest religious awakening America had seen in decades. The man who played Jesus was about to show the world what it really means to pick up your cross and follow him. And by the time those 12 million viewers witnessed his response, nothing in entertainment would ever be the same again. To understand how one man's faith became a weapon that would expose Hollywood's war on Christianity, we need to go back exactly 72 hours before that devastating moment. The invitation had arrived in Jonathan's email, with all the usual Hollywood charm. Whoopi's team wanted him on The View to discuss the unprecedented success of The Chosen and his portrayal of Jesus Christ. On the surface, it seemed like a dream opportunity, a chance to share the gospel with millions of secular viewers who might never step foot in a church. But Jonathan Roumie didn't become the face of faith in America by being naive. What Whoopi's producers didn't know was that Jonathan had been warned. 3 separate sources from inside the network had reached out to his team, all saying the same thing. This wasn't going to be the friendly interview they promised. Internal emails were circulating with phrases like, "Challenge his messaging," "Expose the extremism," and most chilling of all, "Make him defend his mythology." One whistleblower, a production assistant who had worked on the show for years, sent Jonathan's manager a voice message that would change everything. "They're planning something," she whispered. "Whoopi keeps talking about how religious symbols make people uncomfortable. She wants to make an example out of him." That's when Jonathan made the decision that would alter the course of television history. He called his spiritual advisor, Father Mike, and spent the entire night in prayer and preparation. But this wasn't just spiritual warfare he was gearing up for. This was legal warfare. Because what Whoopi's team had no idea about was that Jonathan's attorney had been documenting everything. Every email, every phone call, every hint of religious discrimination was being carefully cataloged. And on the morning of the show, Jonathan did something that would later be called either brilliant or divinely inspired. He activated a recording app on his phone and slipped it into his jacket pocket before walking into that building. The man who portrayed the Prince of Peace was about to wage the most righteous war Hollywood had ever seen. And he was walking into that lion's den with more than just faith as his armor. He had evidence, he had witnesses, and he had something his enemies never saw coming: the truth. Because while they were planning his destruction, he was preparing their exposure. And what happened in that studio wasn't just going to be a confrontation. It was going to be a revelation that would shake the entertainment industry to its very foundation. What Jonathan discovered in the hours before stepping onto that stage would have broken a lesser man. The leaked production documents told a story so sinister, so calculated in its attack on faith, that it read like a blueprint for religious persecution. Internal emails obtained by Jonathan's legal team revealed the true agenda behind his invitation. One email chain between Whoopi and the show's executive producer contained the smoking gun. "We need to make an example out of these evangelical actors who think they can push their agenda on mainstream television." Whoopi had written, "His cross is the perfect symbol to target. Make him choose between his career and his costume jewelry." But it got worse, much worse. A production memo dated just 48 hours before the taping outlined their strategy in devastating detail. They planned to start with softball questions about the chosen, lull him into comfort, and then strike. The memo actually used military terminology, calling it Operation Humble. Their research team had compiled a list of Jonathan's most passionate statements about faith, planning to twist them into evidence of extremism. They even prepared graphics comparing Christian symbols to other religious imagery, designed to make his cross look aggressive and exclusionary. The most damning evidence came from a recorded phone call between Whoopi and a network executive, obtained through a source Jonathan's team refuses to identify to this day. In that call, Whoopi's voice dripped with contempt as she described her plan. "These Jesus freaks think they own morality," she said, laughing. "I'm going to show America what religious intolerance really looks like when I make him take off that cross. If he refuses, he looks like a fanatic. If he complies, he betrays everything he claims to believe. It's checkmate either way." They had even consulted with a psychologist about how to maximize Jonathan's humiliation, learning techniques to trigger defensive responses that would make him appear unhinged on camera. The production schedule was adjusted to give them extra time for what they called the breakdown moment. They expected tears, anger, maybe even a complete meltdown that would become viral content mocking Christianity for months to come. What they didn't expect was that Jonathan had spent years preparing for exactly this kind of spiritual warfare. If you've made it this far, ask yourself this: what would you have done in Jonathan's place? If you discovered that some of Hollywood's most powerful people had conspired to humiliate your faith on live television, planned to use the cross of Christ as a prop in their anti-religious theater, would you have walked away? Or would you, like Jonathan, have walked straight into that trap, knowing you had the power to turn their weapon against them? If you're feeling that righteous fire building in your chest, that holy anger at what they plan to do to the symbol of our salvation, go ahead and comment faith right now. Let's see how many of us are ready to stand with Jonathan against this kind of coordinated attack on Christianity. The moment Jonathan walked onto that stage, you could feel the predators circling. Whoopi's smile was razor sharp, her co-hosts positioned like a firing squad, cameras angled to catch every moment of what they believed would be his destruction. The first 10 minutes played out exactly as their leaked script had planned. Soft questions about the chosen's success, gentle probing about his journey to faith, even some manufactured laughter about his method-acting approach to playing Jesus. Jonathan answered with the grace and humility that had made him beloved by millions. But his eyes never left Whoopi's face. He could see her watching the clock, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then it happened. The trap was sprung with surgical precision. "Jonathan," Whoopi said, her voice shifting to that tone every Christian knows, the one that drips with condescension disguised as concern. "Some of our viewers have written in saying they find religious symbols on television a bit overwhelming. Your cross is quite prominent today." She gestured toward his neck, where a simple silver cross hung, the same one he'd worn in countless interviews without a single complaint. "Would you mind sharing why you feel the need to be so visible with your faith. The studio audience sensed the shift immediately. You could feel the temperature drop as Jonathan realized this wasn't a question, it was an accusation. But instead of taking the bait, he smiled with that same serenity that had captivated audiences worldwide. "Whoopi," he said gently, "this cross isn't a costume piece or a publicity stunt. It's a reminder of who died for me and why I live." His voice carried across that studio like a prayer, calm and unwavering. "I wear it the same way you might wear a wedding ring. It's part of who I am." But Whoopi wasn't finished. She had a script to follow, a destruction to complete. "Right, but we have viewers from all backgrounds, all faiths. Don't you think there's something a little exclusive about wearing such an obvious Christian symbol on a show that reaches everyone?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and you could see the other co-hosts leaning forward, ready to pile on. This was their moment, their chance to humble the man who dared to represent Christ in Hollywood. That's when Jonathan did something that no one in that room expected. Instead of getting defensive, instead of trying to justify his faith to people who had already decided to mock it, he turned to look directly into the camera. Not at Whoopi, not at her co-hosts, but straight into the lens that connected him to millions of believers watching at home. "To everyone watching who's been told your faith is too much, too loud, too visible," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word, "you are not alone, and you are not wrong." The control room erupted in panic. This wasn't in the script. Jonathan was supposed to stammer, to defend, to look foolish. Instead, he was turning their attack into ministry. Whoopi's eyes flashed with anger as she realized her prey was becoming the predator. "Jonathan, we're not attacking your faith," she said, her voice rising slightly. "We're just asking for a little consideration for our diverse audience. Surely you can understand that your cross might make some people uncomfortable." And that's when Jonathan delivered the line that would be quoted in churches across America for years to come. He looked back at Whoopi with eyes full of compassion and said, "Whoopi, if the cross makes you uncomfortable, that's not a problem with the cross. That's a conversation you need to have with the one who died on it." The silence that followed Jonathan's words was deafening. Whoopi's face transformed from shock to rage to something that looked like fear. But instead of backing down, her pride took control. "You know what, Jonathan?" she said, voice sharp as a blade. "Your cross is making me uncomfortable. Remove it or remove yourself from my stage." The gasp from 12 million viewers was audible. This wasn't about inclusion. This was raw persecution, forcing a man to choose between faith and career on live television. But what happened next turned persecution into the most devastating spiritual counterattack in broadcast history. Jonathan stood slowly, reached into his jacket, and pulled out his phone. Whoopi thought she'd won until he touched the screen, and her own voice filled the studio. "I'm going to break this Jesus freak on live television. Make him choose between his precious cross and his career. These Christians need to learn their place." The studio erupted in chaos. But Jonathan wasn't finished. He turned to the camera with perfect composure. "To every believer watching," he said, voice growing stronger, "they just showed you what they really think of your faith. You can demand I remove this cross from my neck, but you cannot remove Christ from my heart." Then, the extraordinary happened. An elderly woman in the audience stood up, holding her own cross necklace. "I stand with Jonathan," she called out. Then, another voice, then another. Within seconds, dozens were standing, revealing crosses and biblical jewelry. A spontaneous revival was breaking out in hostile territory. Jonathan pulled out a second recorder. "Whoopi, your entire planning session was recorded. Every detail of Operation Humble, every laugh about breaking the Jesus freak. In 30 minutes, unless you publicly apologize, that recording goes to every major news outlet in America." If this gave you chills, If you felt the Holy Spirit moving as one man's faith defeated a system designed to destroy it, type FAITH right now. Let's show them believers are still here and still unashamed. What happened in the 30 minutes after Jonathan's ultimatum can only be described as a complete meltdown of everything Whoopi had built. The studio descended into chaos as producers scrambled, trying to cut to commercial, but their own cameras had turned against them. Social media exploded instantly. Stand with Jonathan shot to #1 worldwide within minutes. Whoopi faith became a battlefield where millions of Christians shared their own stories of religious persecution. But the real devastation was happening behind the scenes. Within 15 minutes, 3 major sponsors pulled their ads. Then, 5 more. The network's phone lines crashed from the volume of outraged calls. Churches across America began organizing cross-Sunday services, where entire congregations would wear crosses in solidarity with Jonathan. The man they tried to silence had become the voice of every believer who'd ever been told their faith was too much. Then came the leak that finished everything. A production assistant, later identified as Maria Santos, released the full audio of yesterday's planning meeting. America heard Whoopi and her team laughing about crushing the Jesus boy and discussing how to make Christianity look dangerous. They had even planned follow-up segments mocking other Christian celebrities, with detailed strategies for each takedown. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Jonathan's co-star from The Chosen, who had been watching live, posted a video that broke the internet. "They tried to crucify him on television," he said, tears in his eyes. But like his savior, Jonathan turned their weapon into victory. That clip alone got 20 million views in 6 hours. By hour 2, Whoopi was trending for all the wrong reasons. By hour 4, she was in emergency meetings with network executives. By hour 6, her career was over. The network issued a statement that she would be taking time to reflect. But everyone knew the truth. The woman who tried to remove Christ from television had been removed herself. Meanwhile, Jonathan's response video from his home, wearing the same cross, calmly reading scripture, and praying for Whoopi, showed the world what real Christianity looks like. His grace under attack made their behavior look even more petty and vindictive. If you believe this was divine justice, if you think Jonathan's courage sparked something that needed to happen, comment faith below. Because this wasn't just about one confrontation. This was about every believer finding their voice again. 6 months later, the ripple effects of that single moment are still reshaping America. What started as one man refusing to remove his cross became the spark that ignited the largest faith revival in a generation. Churches report attendance up by 40%. Christian movies are dominating box offices. Most shocking of all, young people are wearing crosses openly again, no longer afraid to show their faith in hostile environments. Jonathan himself became something he never sought to be, a symbol of Christian courage. Universities invite him to speak about standing firm under pressure. His appearances sell out in minutes. The Chosen's viewership exploded to over 200 million worldwide. But perhaps most importantly, believers everywhere found their voices again. The phrase, "remove it or remove yourself," became a rallying cry for anyone being forced to hide their faith. Meanwhile, Whoopi disappeared from public life entirely. Reports suggest she's living quietly, avoiding all media. Some say she's angry, others claim she's broken. But sources close to her reveal something unexpected. She's been attending a small church in upstate New York, sitting in the back, listening to sermons about forgiveness and grace. The woman who tried to remove the cross may be discovering why it was worth defending. The entertainment industry learned a brutal lesson that day. Faith isn't something you can edit out or shame away. It's not a costume piece you can demand someone remove. When you attack it, it fights back. And when it fights back, it doesn't just defend itself. It transforms everything around it. But here's what matters most. This story isn't really about Jonathan Roumie or Whoopi Goldberg. It's about you. About whether you're ready to wear your faith openly, even when the world demands you hide it. About whether you'll stand with the cross when standing costs something. About whether you believe truth is worth defending, even on hostile ground. Jonathan proved that one person, armed with faith and prepared with truth, can stand against an entire system designed to crush them. He showed us that the cross isn't just a symbol we wear, it's a standard we carry into battle. And he reminded America that Christianity isn't a private belief system. It's a public declaration that Christ is Lord, whether that makes people comfortable or not. So here we are. You've watched one man's cross become a lightning rod that changed everything. You've seen what happens when faith refuses to hide. You've witnessed the power of preparation meeting the moment of testing. But the question isn't what Jonathan did in his moment. The question is what you'll do in yours. If this story stirred something in your soul, if it reminded you that your faith is worth fighting for, if it made you proud to believe in a world that tells you not to, then don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with every believer who needs to remember they're not alone. And comment FAITH below, because the cross is still standing, the truth is still powerful, and your voice still matters. The next time they try to silence someone's faith, they'll remember what happened when they came for Jonathan Roumie's cross. And maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before they try it again.